Good to see Brother Jerry here tonight, and I got to wave at him earlier. I didn't get back to where he was at. My knee is much better. Those that were here Tuesday night, we didn't have Wednesday, we had Tuesday service. If you saw me after the service, I was inching my way to the truck. On my way in, I put my cane down, and it evidently got on a leaf and slipped, and it just got worse. So I've been walking with two canes. No pain at all with two canes. And so I've been doing that, and tonight I'm down to one cane. Actually, this morning I could walk around the house without a cane, but the air conditioning people was coming to check all that out, so I had to get up on the ladder and change the filter. And Miss Jan got up there, and I had to pull her off, and so I finished it out, and I'm back to one cane. But thank the Lord, it's much, much better. And the Lord's blessed us in many ways. He blessed us on our trip. We got to see family and loved ones, and even some friends hadn't seen in a while, and we're thankful for that. Deuteronomy chapter 33, I want to start in the first verse. The back of your outline has, if you have an outline, I don't know if I printed enough outlines tonight. I think I printed 25, and we've got a few more than that here, I think. But I have verse 24 through verse number 29, but I wanted to begin with verse number 1, Deuteronomy 33. I want you to know I was starting back in Romans. We were either going to be in the last part of the 8th chapter, finishing that out, or starting chapter 9. Chapter 9 is a little bit of a difficult chapter. It's not beyond comprehension. It's just a little difficult, but I couldn't get traction either place. And so got up 4:30 this morning, ended up at the barber shop pretty early, and I was the third one there, and all first three were preachers. One was going deer hunting. I guess it's dog season. And one was going deer hunting. He had to be there at first thing. And then Brother Bill Blackman was there, and then I was there. And before I got in the chair, then Brother Jackson showed up. And the one that was there before Brother Bill Blackman was, I don't remember his name, but it's before I got there. So anyway, we got up early, and I just couldn't get any traction with any of the messages, and so I just went off and prayed when I got back from the barber shop. Just went off and prayed, and I believe the Lord led me to this passage. The verse is verse 25, I believe, where it talks about, as thy day, so shall thy strength be. And but I want to start in verse 1, where it says, and this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. This is the passage that many Pentecostal preachers, Assembly of God preachers, and some Baptists and some Presbyterians, generally not a lot, but then those that are Episcopals and Catholics, where they believe they can pray a blessing on folk. I have a little bit of a difficulty with that. I pray for God's blessing. And I know that that's what Moses was doing here. Moses wasn't figuring it out. He was given what God had given him. And if God gives you to pray over your children a particular blessing, then you do so, or your grandchildren, then you do so if he gives you that particular blessing. I'm just not sure that it needs to be an every time occurrence. But it says the man of God blessed the children of Israel before his death. And if you go down through there, you see how each one is going to receive a different strength, a different blessing. And as a nation, then all of them will have everything that's needed in order to be a nation that lives for God and serves God. And that's the way churches are. Churches are not an individual. They're not a preacher. They're not deacons. They're not musicians. They're not Sunday school teachers. They're not the audio, video people. They're not the ones that welcome. They're everybody, and everybody does their part. And I'm thrilled that we have somebody that cleans the church, and I put emphasis on cleans. Everybody has a different idea what clean means. And I'm glad my wife has a good idea what clean means. I wouldn't want to live the way I think probably most people live. But everybody has to do their part. I appreciate the people that see something outside that needs picked up or swept or taken care of. I appreciate the fact that they go ahead and take care of that. That's a part of the ministry of the church working together. The Bible, when it tells us to assemble ourselves together, does not mean just come in with a bunch of different parts and lay down somewhere. I remember the first time, and I know I've told this, but my dad told me take a transmission apart. Well, actually, there was two apart the first time. He said, I want you to take the best parts of one and put them in the other. And I said, Dad, I don't know how this works. He said, it's real simple. He said, just lay everything out. You got the same exact parts. Just lay one part here, find the other, and lay it here. Here, here, here. Take the best ones and put them back together. I still didn't know how it worked. Now I worked and worked and worked, and I got one of those gears in backwards. And of course, it wouldn't sink. It wouldn't go mess with the other gears. And I said, I can't do it. And of course, then I got the lecture. Can't's not a real word and all that stuff. And he showed me what I'd gotten wrong and made me take it apart and put it back right. I was able to do it. But that transmission, those gears had to synchronize. They had to work together. If one of them's here and the other's here, they can both turn 100 miles an hour, but they don't do any good. And that's what we've got to do within the church. And Israel, as a nation, should be working together, and God has given Israel as a nation all that they need through the people, through the natural resources, to be the nation of God that he wants them to be. We have all that we need except bringing more in to help with the work and reaching others. We have that which we need to be able to be the church that we ought to be, that others might get saved, that Christians might be encouraged and strengthened and helped. Well, now if you will, look down, since you've got your Bibles open, to verse number 24. And in verse number 24, the Bible says, and of Asher, he said, let Asher be blessed with children, and let him be acceptable to his brethren. Let him dip his foot in oil. And I want to stop there. I think it's important, and you've heard me preach the message on strength for the journey probably about 8, maybe 10 years ago now. And but God promises us strength for the journey. And for Asher here, he's going to bless Asher with a lot of kids. Now, today, people don't think a lot of kids are blessings. They want 1 or 2. Now, we only had 2, but we wanted 4 to 6. We wanted at least 2 boys and 2 girls, and whatever the Lord would give us. But Jan, after 2, she had so much pain and so much problems, the doctor said, you can't have any more. And we didn't have any more. But blessed with children, and then to be acceptable with his brethren. You know, we have to get along with others. It's not easy in life to get along, especially when you're a leader and you're used to leading and somebody else doesn't do things the way you think they ought to do, and you know they could do it quicker, they could do it better if they just listen to you. And so we don't get along very well. We have to learn to assemble ourselves together. And even though some don't do things the way we would do them, generally they make it through life. And we have to work with all that. But here he tells them, let him be acceptable, and then let him dip his foot in oil. And I've not checked out the geographical location of the land of Asher, but I've been told that that's a place where there's oil. And it's important, though, to me, not just for that reason, but because it talks about his foot. Dip his foot in oil. Because the next verse, all the modern translations change the second word of the next verse. The next verse says, thy shoes shall be iron and brass. You say, but it don't make any reason or rhyme for it to be shoes. Who wears iron shoes? Who wears brass shoes? There are 2 groups of people. And if we get to our notes, that's fine. If we don't get to our notes, that's fine as well. But there are two groups of people that would wear those kind of shoes. Now today, people in athletics that wear spiked shoes have iron or spikes in their shoes. And I know some of them made of different things now. The cleats are different to be safer and all that, but they wear that. But basically, they're shoes for parades, and they're shoes that were used for battle, for wartime. And in this life, in Israel's life, they needed iron and brass shoes. When the parade is always a time of celebration. I've never seen a parade that's not a time of celebration. You may have seen one. But first time I saw a New Orleans style funeral parade was in Ponchatoula, Louisiana. And the alligator that they had, called Hardhide, I believe was his name, about 11 foot long. A bunch of boys run him out of a swimming hole back in the late 30s and early 40s. They wanted to go swimming, and their parents told them they couldn't because they'd seen an alligator in that pond. And so them boys got them a bunch of sticks. I'm talking about teenagers, 13, 12, 17. They'd been working hard one day, and they didn't want the alligator to take their swimming hole. They went in and started beating that water and started poking around till the alligator come out the other side. When he come out the other side, some of the parents had already gotten there, and they were able to capture the thing. I guess he wasn't about 5 foot long. And they took him down to the city and said, here, he's yours. Do what you want. The boys have reclaimed their swimming hole. And but old Hardhide was there for years in a cage, and people would throw coins in. I saw him for years and years there. And one day he died. And you'd have thought, they did. They had a New Orleans style funeral. They had that thing in a coffin. They had him back in the back of an open hearse. You know, a lot of the old hearses were open hearses in the back. And they had people with umbrellas, and they had the brass bands playing, and Ponchatoula shut down, businesses shut down, and they were celebrating the life, not the death, but the life of old Hardhide. And then after that, I said, what is that? They said, it's a New Orleans funeral. They celebrate the life. Of course, if you don't know where you're going when you die, you better celebrate the life, because you got nothing to celebrate after you did. You died and went to hell. Not Hardhide, he's a creature, but a person. And but it's a parade, and they dress up for those parades. After World War II, the parades took place, and their annual parades, the 4th of July, and they dress up. Well, in that day, they would dress up. And then the warriors, back in the day of spears and bows and arrows and the days of swords, they would dress up. I don't know how many have seen the leggings and the shoe covers and or shoes. For those that were in the cavalry during that time, there were brass stirrups that so that their feet, if they were hit on the foot part, that it wouldn't cut their foot, that end of their foot off. And then the leggings went over the rest. It was amazing as I studied some of this. But the liberals will say that that's not what it's talking about. But it is. The liberals say that that word, and it's nal, I think N-A-I, not nail, but nal in the Hebrew. And it can be used for a brass and or an iron object. It can be a gate, and that's what most of them do, is they put it for a gate, for that kind of protection. But I believe that it was for Israel as they went out into battle, because the verse before said he dipped his foot in oil. And I believe in context that's what it has to be. And for the church today, the Bible tells us that we are to be prepared with the preparation of the gospel of peace, and our feet are to be shod with that. I believe it's for us today, and I believe it's important. Now, knowing that that's what it's talking about, The Bible tells us, let me read, get back to verse 25. Thy shoes shall be iron and brass, and as thy days, so shall thy strength be. You see, we're not promised next week's strength. We're just not promised it. We're really not even promised tomorrow's strength yet. We're promised day by day. In the New Testament, we're the motto prayer. I don't believe it's the true Lord's Prayer. We call it that. The Lord's Prayer, John chapter 17, where Jesus prayed for those who were believers then and those who would become believers. That's us. He prayed even for our generation. But the motto prayer says, give us this day our daily bread. If you go back to the time of the children of Israel, when they were in the wilderness, they got daily manna. And they couldn't keep it except on the day before the Sabbath. Because they weren't allowed to pick up things on the Sabbath, they were allowed to pick up twice as much, but it had to be eaten one half one day, the other half the next day. And so it's a daily thing. God wants us to seek Him daily. That's not easy for us as Christians. We like to plan ahead, but you can't plan for the strength of God. God's going to give you strength as you need it on a regular, daily basis. I don't remember, I think it's on the inside, but don't turn. I put Job as one of the examples. I don't know how long Job's trials went. I don't know if they went just for days. I don't know if they went for months. I don't know if those trials, are weeks and then months. I don't know how long they went. But I know that Job had to receive strength for everything that happened to him, including his so-called friends. If my so-called friends showed up at the house, I'm thinking of a fellow, Tom Hayes. Some of you, he's written a lot of music. He's out of the Carolinas. Some of you probably, if you saw some of his songs, and I couldn't tell you what they are, would know them. But boy, all of a sudden one day, Tom just quit. I mean, when I say quit, he went into his office and locked the door and said, that's it, I don't know what I'm going to do. Something clicked, something happened. And a friend of mine, I say a friend of mine, he's passed away now, really wasn't a friend, he was my song leader some years back in another church. But he called me, he said, man, you know Tom, you need to go to the Carolinas and you need to talk with Tom. I said, well, I can call his wife, but if Tom's not going to let me in, there's no sense in me driving to North Carolina. And his wife said, he won't talk to anybody, preacher. He won't. He just won't do it. We were in Bible college at the same time. That's how I knew him. And I knew some of the people from his hometown and the church he was out of. But he said, nobody. He hasn't seen anyone. And I don't know if it went on for 2 or 3 months. But one day an older preacher come in, just barely able to move, and knocked on the door and said, let me in. He said, I'm going to stand here till I fall down, and Tom got up and let him in. The preacher went in and looked at all the books in his library and everything, looked at him, and he saw the pitiful condition he was in. He was just eating enough to stay alive, sleeping enough, just enough to be able to have a little bit of waking time, so he was just a mess. And the preacher looked at him. He said, who do you want to give this to? He said, what do you mean? He said, you don't need it. You don't need your library. You don't need that book. Your music, you don't need any of that no more. You're not going to sing for the Lord anymore. And boy, this older preacher just began to go around and show Tom what God had used him to do. And he'd gotten discouraged somehow. And it wasn't long before he called out and told his wife, said, send in a couple of cups of coffee. And man, they got down and prayed, and Tom got right back in the battle again. And I hadn't seen him in about 2 years, but the last I knew, he was still in the battle. We need strength for the day. You can be a Tom Hayes. And I called Tom one of the greats. People would go on cruises, with him, because of his singing and different things. And because of his preaching, tremendous preacher. And they would go on cruises. He could fill I don't know if the whole ship or if they just bought sections of a ship, but there'd be hundreds that would want to go and just be around him all the time. But you don't need strength that you can depend upon for yourself to be a mental giant, to be a spiritual giant. You need the strength of God every day. That's why I believe that every day we need to spend time with God in fellowship. Not asking for anything, but in fellowship. Yeah, the song, when I first heard the song, it was considered too liberal to sing in churches. Just a little old chorus. I didn't come here to ask you for anything. I just came to talk to you, Lord. You've answered a million prayers or more that I forgot to thank you for. I just came to talk with you, Lord. Maybe tomorrow there'll be trouble and sorrow, and 1,000 teardrops may fall. But until I face tomorrow's task, I have no special favor to ask. I just came to talk with you, Lord. I believe there ought to be those times during the day. I really do. I try to make that the first thing that I do of a morning. Actually, I take that back. After coffee or during coffee. That's the first important thing after coffee that I do is try to spend some time with the Lord and just talk to him. Now, sad to say, sometimes when I'm just talking, I get into the wants and the needs and all of that. But it ought to be a practice. You know, go to Grandma's house. You want the kids to get up in their lap and tell her how much they love her. You don't want them to go in and say, Grandma, when you die, can I have your... You don't want that. Grandma, you going to fix me what I want today? Grandma, you make the best quilts. Look at that quilt, Grandma. You did that. Grandma, you did this. And that's what grandmas want to hear. Oh, they want to hear about what kind of cookies the kids want too. But they want to be loved for who they are, not just what they can do. I believe in order to continue to get that strength on a daily basis, we've got to spend time with him, just with him. Need to spend time with our wives the same way, and I'm guilty of that. You know, I'm guilty of not spending that individual time with her. But we need to do that. We need to spend some time in prayer, then in Bible study. Actually, not Bible study only. If all you do is study your Bible, then you're trying to get something for you. There needs to be sometimes you just read it. Not all the time, but just sometimes that you just read it. Preachers and teachers are the worst. Because I go to reading my Bible, and I got a message for very long. And boy, I want to write it down, and I've lost the context, the passage. I've lost, this is God's letter to me. My mother passed in March, and my sister sent us down the last few things. Wasn't very much in the shoebox, but sent us back down the last few things, I don't know, 2 months ago now. And opened it up, and Jan, my wife, Miss Jan, when we were dating, of course, we were in Chattanooga, her folks in Franklinton, and my folks up in Indiana. I would have to take a chaperone. That was the rules of the college, for her to go up and visit with me, and we did that a couple of times. And but she wrote my parents a letter, a card. And I'll tell you, I read it the other day, and she said, give me that. She said, I know you must be wonderful people because you raised a wonderful son. She was in love and didn't know any better. I read that thing 3 or 4 times. I said, oh, I'm going to hold this over your head till the day both of us die. She said, well, it was true back then, but you changed. So I've finished. Anyway, we need to learn to read God's love letter to us without trying to get something out of it, without trying to really learn something. Anyway, I didn't intend to go here. I don't know if I need this more than you do, but I need it. And then we need to spend time with God in prayer, seeking his will, not ours. Preachers, again, are the world's worst. I can tell God exactly how I want him to work in my wife's life. I can tell him how I want him to work in my children's life. I can tell him how I want him to work in the deacon's life, the song leaders, the ones that work in the music, and every other place. I can give God all kind of instructions. Nobody here guilty of that, are you? The biggest thing is for us to find the will of God in a matter and put it in God's hands. Said if we pray according to his will, he heareth us. 1 John 5. And if he hear us, we know that we have the petitions, the answers, that we desire of him. And we need to learn to, in our prayer, seek the will of God. And I believe that's in the model prayer. Thy will, not my will, be done, and on earth as it is in heaven. And in other words, obedience. We need to come to that place. And then there's the time where we need to just lay our heart out. Lord, this is what I need. I need this today. He will always give us the strength that we need. In Job's life, how many other days it was a battle. I don't know how long it was, but God didn't remove one of those things during the battle. He didn't remove one during the battle. But at the end, he blessed him over and abundantly and above. Over abundantly and above. Now, he didn't give him another wife. Just gave him more children. It's an amazing thing what we think God ought to do. I better move on. I'm not exactly sure how I wanted to deal with that. But we want God to answer our prayers the way we want them answered. Not knowing that God is doing something in people's lives. Sometimes I've helped people when I shouldn't have. My own kids. I've helped them out of hardships that I shouldn't have helped them out of. I think they'd have been better off had they have had to dig their own way out. There are times when you need to help them, and there are times when you don't. And there you need the wisdom of God to know which is which. We find that Stephen, God didn't answer his prayer. God strengthened him, but never brought him out of it until death. When they took Stephen out of the city and stoned him, the Bible says that the heavens opened up and he saw Jesus standing at the right hand of the Father. You see, he knows what we're going through. And sometimes he doesn't answer. Sometimes the answer is, I'm going to take you home and you're not going to suffer that again. You're going to come be with me. Stephen was honored. Do you remember what Stephen said? He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Stephen was carrying the message they needed to take care of their life's problems, their eternal problems, and they put him to death. Paul had strength every day, but he besought the Lord 3 times before God told him, my grace is sufficient. Our weaknesses sometimes, now I'm not talking about the propensity to go into sin, but our physical or whatever our weaknesses are sometimes is God's way of saying, I got something to show you. Just hold on. And in this life, Paul never got rid of it. Now, Daniel, man, he was cast into the den of lions. I almost said fiery furnace. He was cast in. And the king came and said, Daniel, did thy God keep thee? Did he preserve thee? And Daniel said, O king, live forever. I don't know why they said that to bad kings. But he did. Hey, by the way, so did the 3 Hebrew children. O king, live forever. My God has protected me. That's not the exact quote, but that's what was said. The three Hebrew children, the king got mad. Pharaoh, but the king got mad. He said, you're going to bow? And he said, I'm going to make it where you bow. Hey, they not only had the pressure on them, he heated it up more. And while it's being heated up, giving them an opportunity to change their mind. And what they say? O king, live forever. We're not hasty to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve will deliver us. But if not, what's the if not? If not, we're better off serving him and going out in death, meeting him face to face. Can you imagine as they were cast in to that fiery furnace? The ones that threw them in, the biggest, the strongest, were consumed by the flames. And the king looks over and said, I see four, and one looks like the Son of God. There are sometimes, even within the battle, you can be like Daniel and the three Hebrew children. You can have the perfect peace, the protection of God, and there's sometimes you don't. But as our day, so our strength will be. Now, I got to a few of the illustrations, but I didn't get to much of the message tonight. There's a whole lot more about the strength for the journey. And by the way, you may not need this. I need it every day. I do. But you may know somebody that does need it. You may need to take it home and read it and apply what you can to your heart, and then take it and give it to somebody else that needs it. Maybe you need to write some notes in there. There's a place for some notes. You give it to somebody else that needs it, that's going through a hard time. I know, again, it doesn't flow. On the front page there, I've got the verse 1 Corinthians 10:13 about temptation. There are some things that are common to man, and we're going to suffer. Those that are my age and older, you know what a difference age makes. Sure you do. And you're going to suffer. Not everybody is going to live healthy to their last day. And the older we get, the more aches and pains. My friend over at Bob Simpson had that back surgery, and he wasn't able to preach even this last Sunday yet after his back surgery. But he thinks he'll be able to preach this coming Sunday. He's 11 years older than I am. And he still, goes as much as he can. He said the other day, my legs and feet started killing me. I said, yes, sir. He said, and told my wife, and she said, yeah, my arthritis too. Changing weather. We know that. Is God going to remove all that from us? Not necessarily. But what he will do is he'll go with you through whatever trial, whatever problem comes in your life. But it's a limited offer, man. I need to get to that. I'm not going to turn and look inside. It's a limited offer. Number one, it's an offer that's by faith. If you don't get out of the boat, if you're like Peter and say, Lord, bid me to come unto thee, and Jesus says, come, and you won't get out of the boat, he's not going to levitate you over there. Put your foot in the water. Had the children of Israel, and had they not gone across and started across, the waters would not have receded. The man of God had to do what was right, and then they had to make their move. It's by faith. James says, the one that's driven and tossed by the winds and the waves, let not that man think he shall receive anything of the Lord. You've got to have some faith. It's limited. It's limited to the day that you need it. And the next day, what does the Old Testament tell us? His compassions, his mercies are new every morning. That's the way it's supposed to be. But we have to apply it to our lives to get that strength that we need for whatever comes our way. And remember this. If you'll take God's way of escape. Now sometimes God's way of escape is not the easy way. Just not at all. We talk about David. David saw a woman. He said, who is she? The servant said, the wife of Uriah. David should have turned his head. He shouldn't have been looking to begin with. But he should have turned his head and said, that's one of my best soldiers. I better not disregard my friend. But he didn't do it. The warnings come to us. We just have to take God's way of escape. We have to swallow our pride sometimes and say no. The only time that I remember stealing anything as a kid, a friend of mine said, let's go to the store and we'll get a Coke and an ice cream. I thought he had money. We got over to that country store and walked around to the side. He said, and I don't know why I remembered this today. I hadn't thought about it in years. But he reached down and picked up a case of Coke bottles, handed it to me, empty Coke bottles. And he reached down and got one and said, follow me in. So I followed him in. We got in there and he set his down. And he said, I'm not sure if he called me Bill or William, but he said, we want to get a Coke and an ice cream. And there was just enough 2-cent deposit to do so, I guess, with the case. And the lady looked at us, said, y'all brought those? And the boy said, yeah, we brought them. I didn't answer. But I couldn't say I took it from the side over there. He handed them to me. So we got it, and as we walked out, the lady said, come here. I said, what's that? She said, I'm going to put that on your mother's bill. I said, don't you do that, please. She'll kill me. I said, those bottles were around the side, weren't they? I said, they were. I said, I'll go home and I'll find some change. We had a junkyard. I went to dig in some seats and see if I could find enough change to pay for that before it went on my mother's bill. I got talked into it, not realizing what I was going to do. I should have been the one who stood up, because I was a year older than him, and said, that's wrong. But I didn't. I should have been his warning. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, we put ourselves in your hands tonight.